Hey, this is Christa.
And this is Micah.
And
we are bad people.
Yeah, one of the things we have in common is this whole like good girl thing from our childhood, which is funny. I think, as we keep kind of discovering who each other are and getting to know each other better, that's just sort of a common theme for us, which is hilarious given this point and what we've decided to call our podcast and the whole thing. But I know for me, like living, it was 36 years really trying to maybe right some of the brokenness that was in my life that I always felt sort of dogged by, and just really trying to dissect the Bible and go, okay, I'm not just going to read it and not do it. I'm going to, like what James says, like be not just hearers of the word, but doers, right? Yeah. And so, in all things, like really just, tried to live right and righteously in that sort of, again, we always talk about Christianese, but that kind of, all these sorts of ideas about how one should go about living right. And so, spending so many years doing that and always living sacrificially, like obviously not perfectly, but really like a denial of self. And then, getting to a point, being married, it would have been 15 years. And having 4 kids who were kind of in their teenage years, later childhood years. And then, finding myself, being a part of a church community. At that point was a creative director at church. And again, on paper, my ex-husband and I were, just kind of living, I guess some people would say, sort of the perfect life, the ideal. And in all of that, I was in an affair with somebody else who was also in ministry. And that was the moment of breaking, of complete shattering of soul. And completely feeling totally empty and going, how on earth did I let this happen? There is nothing in my life that would have shown that I would end up in this place. And it was so strange to have built a life based on what I thought was truth and what was right, and to find out that there was like no foundation in that it was just, kind of like an illusion. And that I couldn't actually find a footing and get myself out of the situation, or even find a way to have not gotten myself in the situation, which is always, I think, for a lot of people very surprising, because, I mean, we know how to do the right things, and we know, well, that's sin, you just don't do that, or that's like bad. And especially, even in just regular secular world or normal world, everyone knows you don't have an affair. Like, that's easy. And it should have been so much easier for me, given that I know what's right and wrong, more so, whatever that means. But I just didn't. I tried to run, I tried to do the right things, and regardless, it was present in my life. And I remember thinking, oh I'm going to hell, and well, I guess I just have to keep this secret forever, and I just have to find a way to carry forward. And then from that moment, just everything continued to unravel. Just relationships were sort of, I guess, exposed, and kind of these root reasons for why it all happened to begin with just started to, again, expose themselves. And it was just trying, you just end up like lie after lie, and just like, no, I'll make it better. And then, it all comes out. And then, what do you do from there? And how do you possibly try and rebuild a life that you've completely destroyed, and will forever be feeling like you are a bad person because of that? And, truly, where do you go from there? And how do you, like, in those beginning moments, again, just denial of, oh no, right, it's just bad. I just have to, just do the right thing and tell the truth and make it all better. And when telling the truth doesn't really get you a repaired marriage, or doesn't get you restored relationships, or doesn't get you, I don't know, not that I needed a job back necessarily, but completely leaves, again, still a life decimated. Like, what does that mean, right?
Yeah.
You hear of course, you're supposed to be able to restore anything. I mean, that's sort of what the Christian faith is kind of about, is that there's always hope and there's always redemption and there's
Reconciliation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when it doesn't all kind of get put back together, it's strange because you're like, oh, wait, you do something bad. You say, that's sin, you confess, and then you work towards like restoration in that area of life and truth telling and healing. That's supposed to make it all better. Then your marriage can get back put back together, or then your children can see that, oh wow, God does miracles or whatever else. And to not have that happen is really strange and very testing for your faith. And yeah, so that's, I guess, kind of where I live currently. And that's a bit of my bad people, my bad person moment, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
Moment of being broken. It kind of goes back to, I'll backtrack a bit, but I was raised in a Christian home and grew up very immersed in church and I guess Pentecostal kind of tradition of Christianity, and the oldest of 8 kids, so I had a really large family. But basically, a lot of my childhood was, I guess, summarized by trying to live a very like perfectionist kind of like good girl life. I had kind of an interesting relationship with my mom, and because of that, tried to always have everything kind of perfect, and love was very conditional kind of on my behavior and things like that. And then when I ended up leaving home, I got involved in a church, quite a large church in Australia. And it was amazing. There was a lot to it that was really attractive to me, especially as a creative person. They had an amazing like musical and creative team. Ended up meeting my husband there, and we got married. And then we were very involved in the church, like as volunteers. And then further on down that journey, we ended up like serving in various leadership roles. And then the final one position that we were kind of in during our journey there was a creative pastor role, like a volunteer role, which was very like full-time kind of capacity. And yeah, I think from the outside, we were kind of like that perfect couple as well. We had all the things going for us, like young family. We were serving God. We were, in leadership, and there were a lot of people that we were kind of modeling our lives after, and then we had people who were probably watching us as well. And so we had our first son, and that was like an incredible experience. We fell in love as parents, and then about 5 months after our son was born, we actually had a surprise pregnancy, and we were kind of trying to deal with that surprise. And at the time, we were really excited to like have another child, because we had always wanted to maybe have kids close together, and we were like, well, this is really close, but we're here for it. Yeah, we're like, this will be kind of hard, but we'll just, why not? Let's have the kids now. And then I was 13 weeks with that pregnancy when I actually ended up having a miscarriage. And then, that experience was really traumatic. So we were actually like serving in church when I started to kind of miscarry, which was crazy. Ended up in emergency like multiple times. And then after actually losing our baby, then I had like a really traumatic hemorrhage happen. So I was in emergency again, and it was just a very traumatic, scary time. I had a moment where I was like, is this it? Like, is this life ending? Because I was, this is graphic, but I had blood pouring out of me, and those thoughts just crossed your mind, like, what if this is it? Like, what if, and I can say at the time, I remember just feeling so kind of like disconnected from anything kind of spiritual or faith wise. I was just like, those were not the things I was thinking about in that moment. In that moment where I was like, is this Is this it? Honestly, I just felt the greatest like sadness for my son if he was to have to live on like without me. And so that started a whole series of thoughts of like just life and death, I think, and people dying from tragedy. And then that in turn kind of was tied into what I believed at the time, which was very like, I guess, evangelical beliefs framework of like people die and go to heaven, and we're here to kind of save people and spread the gospel and get people saved and to know Jesus. And when we die, we have this hope of going to heaven. And all of that just seemed very almost irrelevant, like in that moment of breaking.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that just began a deep dive for me into my belief system. And while dealing with the trauma of my miscarriage and the grief, I was then kind of like also ended up just feeling really, really disoriented with my faith. And then that began a big process for me of deconstruction, for lack of a better word. And
right, which is always kind of received poorly by people who actually know what that word means.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I mean, at the time, I would not have labeled it as that. I just had all these questions that I didn't really know who to go to with. Yeah. And it was a really like lonely, devastating time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for me, that was kind of the moment that just put a fissure or a massive crack into what had been a very kind of like straightforward, perfect, these are the steps you follow. But so I started asking a lot of questions around like tragedy and what about people that die and that have no control over that, or it brought up a lot of questions that I then had to go on the journey of answering. And on that journey, I found, because of the church we belong to in our community and what the faith kind of framework was, I found it really hard to voice those questions and to be honest about the fact that I was like doubting a lot of things, or that I had come to some really different conclusions, like as a result of those questions.
Yeah.
And I just didn't feel the space to be able to be honest about that with a lot of our friends. And part of that was probably me. But yeah, I don't know. It was just a confusing time.
Yeah. That's I feel like a common thing for us is the foundation not being there. Like with a deconstruction, it's sort of like you're really trying to peel back everything and go, like what actually is true? Like what can I build a life on? How can I move forward?
Yeah.
And I think that's where we both kind of have an intersection of like you didn't do anything to cause the pain that you were seeing in your life, whereas my actions caused this kind of unraveling for me. And so, but then for both of us to go like, okay, but why and how did this happen, and why can't we move forward past these moments?
Yeah.
Right? Both really huge, like breaking moments, right?
For sure. Yeah. And I think maybe that was part of, not necessarily that I was thinking, I did go through a huge period of being like, well, what does it mean to believe in a good God?
Yeah.
And to believe for good things to happen?
Totally.
Like, is that just kind of something I've been conditioned to believe, that like if you believe, it's always going to be great for you?
Yeah.
And so then I had to delve into, well, maybe that's just a cultural thing that has been has been kind of drummed into me.
Yeah.
And it's not actually biblical.
No.
And so then I had to dive into like, just what does the Bible actually say? What is just Christian culture and what is scripture? And then that led me on a whole nother journey of like my relationship with the Bible, which got really complicated as well.
Well, yeah. And like, it's so hard to have perspective in something when you're always told to reference like scripture or the Bible, right?
Yeah.
So like, how on earth do you see something beyond that when that is just consistently like, no, all your answers are here. Like, no, just pray, or pray in scripture all the time. And for us to kind of, again, take a moment and go, okay, but like, let's study like the whole world and like what is actually good and bad, and how do people interact with their suffering, and And why on earth would we believe that if we did the right things, because you hear that all the time, that just do the right thing and everything will work out, or God will bless you, or whatever else. And you hear that stuff like outside of the church too, sort of, but it's just, again, like, how do we peel that back? Because those are the moments that we find ourselves in, I think, right now.
Yeah.
That I don't want any part of this, like, good and bad. Like, how do you move forward?
Yeah, the extremes of like, and it's funny because it's such a simple answer to like, just read the word.
Oh, boy.
And that is a black and white thing in itself. But then you're like, read a nuanced, contradictory, very rotten and Bible.
Yeah, exactly. Like with no perfect story.
Yeah, and then no space to be like, but I mean, you could ask, what does this mean if it was in line with like theology, or if it was going to be wrapped up theologically in a way that the governing kind of body was happy with. Like, basically, you could ask questions as long as those answers were going to lead you to the theological outcomes of that, like, community. Yeah. And so that's where I found there was just kind of a disconnect in that, where there was like just not an ability to actually really be honest about like the stuff that was kind of unexplainable, or that what there were no easy answers for.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I want to say why this podcast or whatever, these conversations are going to exist, is because we need a forum, an avenue for us to talk about things honestly, openly, as ugly as they are. I mean, my story has a lot of very ugly truth to it, perspective maybe, or just my, like from my vantage point, this is what has happened. Or what choices I've made. And so, and they're not pretty. And
this is life.
Yeah, but they just are. Like this, they're just things that have happened and that now I have to like move forward from, but then how to discern like, okay, what is the right choice and what's the wrong choice? And when you're being encouraged again to just like, well, follow this way of doing things, but that way of doing things hasn't gotten an outcome that, again, was sustainable for me. Led to a very empty, like consistently having to perform, consistently having to feel like I, if I just did one more thing, and everything will be okay. Which, again, it's just, I mean, we're both relatively young. These are just like young people problems, I guess. But no, like we have another like 40, 50 years on this planet or whatever. So then how do you do that well, and not, again, just with these like easy answers of, well, read John, whatever, 14, on, you know, like, oh, okay. Like,
and I think that's that makes me think of a good question as well, of like, when your standard of what was good and bad before is no longer kind of, it doesn't really hold up. Then how do you figure that out outside of that framework? Like, what is good and what is healthy and what is going to like contribute to my life, and what is going to maybe put me on a path of like self-sabotage or spiral into depression or, you know, like, because that's a very real possibility.
These things are good in theory, you know, like denial of self sounds like great. Like, oh yeah, everyone should be selfless and put others above themselves. But that actually, for one, isn't really what scripture says. That's what we believe Jesus did. Like, he died, he was abused, he like went on a cross for us. But are we called to the same behavior?
Totally.
I don't know. And are we supposed to love others to the detriment of ourselves? No, it's an equal thing, right? And so to really think about what we've kind of like believed or been like led into and go, wait, that actually isn't even what the Bible says. And then go, that's actually really not sustainable. And that is going to lead to destruction. So.
And even sometimes, I mean, it might be what the Bible says, but
is it okay to question that?
Totally. And does that is this okay to question? And also, what if the Bible is wronged?
Or what if big thing?
Or what if that just like was written in a context in a time where reality was very different, and there were not the same modern problems that we have today, and like psychologically,
and
so many.
These are things that I found, you find, I think we're not free to ask these questions because it makes I would say makes people really uncomfortable. And the whole purpose and point of even like, or what we hope to endeavor to do here is to, it's open-ended. These are discussions. These are like, this will never be wrapped up in a nice bow. It's like, okay, like you'll constantly come up against something in life that it's so comforting to have the answer, but I think we've both found.
Yeah.
And even seen that.
Easy and nice to have the answers.
Yeah.
But I think like what you're saying is from getting to know you more and like hearing your heart on this whole podcast, like our desire is kind of not to like put our struggles or whatever or things like on display per se, but more to just, this is an attempt to be really just like brutally honest about what is, and to hopefully give other people listening courage to like be honest about things, even when it's hard, like even because I think that's the hard part is like this at a certain level of honesty can be really hard and can put you in confrontation with a lot of things.
Well, and I think that I know I identify as a bad person. That's a funny way to say that, but very much like I don't feel like I'll ever kind of escape that label. And if anything, want to embrace the label and go, okay, that's fine. I can be this bad person forever and kind of, endeavor to do something better.
Yeah.
And not continue on in like I don't know, whatever, making poor decisions, even though I don't seem to be able to do that lately, but that's okay. Anyways, but then to go, okay, and we always need to label, like it's just who we are as people is to go, well, that's good, that's bad.
Yeah.
But really to just, I think both of us have just tried to go, okay, these things just are.
Yes.
These things, I know in our past, we have some interesting moments that are things that have happened to us. So then do we villainize those people and do we go, well, that was so bad and so wrong and they're so evil or whatever, but that doesn't help. It doesn't help anybody. These things happen. Life is complicated.
Yeah.
Relationships are nuanced, right? And to go, okay, like, and maybe I just feel like I need to kind of go out in this whole like bad kind of, that's just who I am. But I also want to go, okay, but these things just were, and actually they're common things as well. I mean, even if we go back to the Bible, you see so many colorful stories that you just like to go,
well, David was so amazing. He had such like a, a worshipful heart, and he was like, all these things, and then completely glaze over the fact that,
he was a murderer and an adulterer.
And exactly. Mr. Philanderer himself or whatever. And and again, there's some Christian answer for us in stuff like that, but we like to just pretend that doesn't apply
now,
right? Like,
where we hold to marriage so tightly, or we hold to this idea of how righteous living needs to look. And of course, I mean, there's a lot of benefit to, parents sticking together and their kids being raised. Like, I know you and Grant have a good, like, it's working out. It's not in trouble.
Hopefully. I think so.
10. How many years in?
10. 10, 11. Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
So it's great, but it's hard, right?
It is hard. It's like, it's not easy. But commitment and
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say our commitment to anybody who's listening is to just be real and to be honest and try and walk forward in some sort of path.
Totally. Yeah. And even, in the midst of things kind of being unresolved and
to kind of ask like difficult questions, like, okay, like if I had an affair and I now have, my kids are in a divorce, like their parents are not together, and I go, does that make me a bad person? Like, am I forever going to be defined by this massive failure? Or is there hope for me? And I honestly, that's my biggest struggle, is I don't feel a ton of hope. And it's an unpopular kind of place to be. A lot of people go, no, there's whatever. And to just go, no, right now I feel super hopeless. And that my broken narrative is never going to change. And those can be some really dark places to live.
Yeah, for sure. I did have one question about just like, because you mentioned that when the affair happened, you were kind of like internally, I'm going to hell or whatever. And so I'm just curious, like, how long did that kind of hang over you? And did you move on from believing that? Or,
no, well, yes, like, oh man, it's like God's kindness. Again, like I find myself believing in God in these moments now, currently. But that all came out because I think statistically, I think it's like 70% of affairs are never found out. Nobody ever says anything. Yeah. And I mean, I totally get why you wouldn't. You just were like, because it's so much pain for everybody else, right?
Totally.
And again, God, I believe, kind of rescued me through that. I never would have confessed. I never would have said anything, but it was great people that were also involved in this awful thing that had the courage to face their own stuff. And therefore I had to. Yeah. And it was in those moments that I went, wow, like I would have kept this secret, believing that no way, like I don't think that I can, profess to be a Christian.
Yeah. Or I've just messed up. Exactly. So I'm done. Yeah.
And I just kept thinking like, no, I'll keep serving in church, whatever, or, pretending to be this good person, not for my own sake, but because I do believe that people, like what I found in the church was a place of belonging, a place of safety, a place of feeling heard or understood. Yeah. And so I thought, okay, well, if I can hopefully share that with somebody else, which is what I believe the gospel is, right? Then it's okay. Then I will keep this secret to myself and I'll face the consequences for my quote unquote sin. And I'm like, because I didn't believe that I could like accept what Jesus had done for me, knowing that, I continued in sin. And honestly, if that hadn't come out, I would have like 1 affair, 2 affairs, 3 affairs, like for sure. There's an emptiness and a hole inside me and a problem that was going on that I couldn't fix without facing the truth. And so it was definitely that uncovering of being exposed that allowed me. And now to this point, like I have a very different understanding of what eternity or what like who God, that all unravels. But I think definitely like this concept of what heaven is or afterlife is for sure very, very different.
Okay, that's interesting. And when you say like if that hadn't been exposed, was it like this is getting into the nitty-gritty, but like a friend, did you feel safe with any kind of friends to confide in?
No, or nobody knew.
Okay.
Like, being in like, everyone knew something was wrong. It's like, oh, you're different.
So even that, like your behavior maybe very changed a bit.
For
like,
sure.
And so there were kind of signs.
But I remember just like when you sort of like split, like you have to, it's a very strange experience to kind of like live a total lie and to be in so much like deception that you have to kind of like, especially if you haven't participated in that before in life and you live pretty like,
well, especially in like a church community too, where you're also like, but there's people that look up to me or that like they have this perspective of me and I can't share that because that might like ruin their belief in God or
totally
like such a like a domino effect.
Well, and you just get deeper and deeper into like weird kind of, I don't even know if it's like theology, but just like okay, well maybe I can make this better, and then you stop like, I don't know, it's
pay penance or
exactly and you like that's the beautiful thing now I think is that I'm like, I totally have so much more compassion for people that find themselves in like way bigger, like not bigger of a mess than I do. Like to see like, oh yeah, like if you're caught, bear with this story for a second, but like I had somebody, I was like, oh, there's murderers and then there's me, right? Like truly, I just like given my specific circumstances are not pretty.
I find that interesting too, how we kind of like have a hierarchy of like what's, the ultimate sin.
Totally.
And then like this is a minor sin, or this is like you'll be okay if you commit this one.
Yes. But and like I would say and especially women, like, or no, guys too, like at least for the other party involved, like, oh, I could never do that to my wife. And you did that to another woman who had children. Like that's like a whole other like it's just girl code, right? And so anyways, in that hierarchy, I was saying that to somebody and I'm like, I cannot, like
yeah, again, like I will never escape this feeling of being such a terrible human.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh no, pedophiles are after murderers. And I was like, oh, yeah, thanks. Cute. Yeah, like true. Okay, great.
Yeah.
But all that to say is like you think of somebody who gets himself into, like you think of like the abuse that's happened in the church for years.
Oh,
like,
totally. Yeah.
yeah, like people that have abused young children. And
Yeah.
then you kind of, again, no, not necessarily, you just have a greater understanding for how people get themselves into this spot, right?
Totally.
Going,
Yeah.
well, I have to abstain from sex. I can never get married. I can, I don't know, I have to live this very like pious life. And then they are completely in denial of the fact that they have real human needs of human connection and all that. And
Yeah.
then you go, oh shit, like
Yeah.
that's exactly how
Yeah.
people get into these disgusting situations.
Totally.
The disgusting situation. Right?
Yeah.
So, and you just justify and all that. So again, not to go, because yeah, there's some things that are just, I would say I'm in the category of like, that's a horrendous thing to have done to other humans.
Yeah.
But in that bit of being completely honest about how gross it got, you're like, oh yeah, you understand how other people can find themselves in those where they choose door number 3, right?
Yeah.
They're like, well, I want to like live for God and I want to do the right thing, but I am like completely empty and
Yeah.
all of that. And then you're like, well, this door, yeah, it's just what
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah.
And it's, again, like it's our human, like we're quite debate. Like it,
Yeah.
we got this really base thing going on, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it gets scary.
Yeah. I had a thought coming there. Actually, there's a movie that Grant and I watched that exemplifies this very specific thing of like, it's just 1 or 2 decisions. You're one or 2 decisions away from complete. Yeah. And this film is called Inside Man, and it kind of
Oh yeah, I've seen that. Have you? So good.
it documents he's like a priest, right?
Yeah, so it's such a great show.
Son messes
Yeah.
up somehow, and in trying to defend his son, basically, spoiler alert.
Yeah,
Don't if you've not watched this, sorry. He ends up, is it committing murder or
something like
to that extent?
Yeah,
where it's like
he becomes the thing he hates the most.
totally
Huge.
Yeah,
I think we'll talk about
yeah,
this
for sure.
Like almost the trying to outrun our broken. Like I would say,
Yeah,
that's kind of in those origin stories for both of us. Like we have brokenness in our family.
Yeah,
and complexity in relationship. And
Yeah.
you're like, okay, I'm gonna like get married and have like 2.1 child.
Yeah.
Like all these things and go, that's how I keep myself safe. That's
Yeah.
how I make sure that I don't repeat the same patterns that
Yeah.
family has.
Yeah.
And for me to specifically go, oh shit,
Yeah.
I've literally done the same thing.
Yeah.
To like actually encounter like the parts of like the people that have hurt me. I saw that in myself.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's again fascinating.
Yeah. It just kind of challenges that whole, I think that probably, which, we'll talk about in another episode, but brings the conversation around to like our self-perception too, of like, I would never do that.
That's the thing.
Yeah, the like humility and what we believe about ourselves can be so like powerful.
Yeah.
And often subconscious.
Yeah.
And that itself, like doing something you never thought you would do.
Yeah.
Is like also a shock.
A shock
system and like,
And then to not be able to look yourself in the mirror and then have to like, again, you still have to go on. Like there is, I think when you encounter moments like this, you have a very, like the thoughts of like ending life are super common. Like, and I don't think a lot of people understand that because you're just like, you're
kind of trapped.
Yeah. Like, and you're splitting of like your soul almost and going, the thing I thought would never happen or that I vowed could never be because of all the pain from your history or whatever. And then to not, again, to completely lose yourself and not be able to look yourself in the face and to lose your integrity.
Yeah.
And then, you're like, well, I can't ever come back from that.
Yeah.
And I want to say that, like, I mean, I'm here today, so you can.
Yeah.
Then it is a little bit of a fight going forward to
then
redefine yourself. Because if all the good things that you did in life led you to this place where you could do that, and there was, again, I would say no like indicators that was possible for me.
Yeah.
Then to go, how do I not do that all over again? Right? To live a life that and that's a ton of uncovering.
Yeah. Work and
all the good stuff.
Anyways.
Yeah. All right.
That was
Episode 1.